We say, I'm tired, I can't do this, and then wonder why we then are tired or can't do the thing we declared we couldn't do. Whether you are tired or can't do something, you are right. It is your declaration. Words are so powerful that they can either build or destroy. Which one are you choosing? If you have told yourself to relax, to focus, breathe, take it easy, you got this, you are using autosuggestion. And autosuggestion is the easiest way to reprogram our subconscious mind. The problem is most of us use autosuggestion to focus on negative things rather than positive ones. It is my hope that if you've been going through a dark streak, that the light will now come on your path and your impossibilities will turn to possibilities. Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. We have embarked on the reading of the book titled Autosuggestion, What It Is, and How to Use It for Health, Happiness, and Success by Herbert A. Parkyn. If you found me at this video, glad you found me. Go ahead, make sure to visit my playlist to grab the previous chapters, and to my family, friends, and dear subscribers, welcome back. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Like I mentioned before, this book may be a little bit antiquarian, but you know what? There are golden nuggets, and those are the things that we're looking for, those timeless golden nuggets. Join me now as I turn the page to Chapter 5. Autosuggestion for the Formation of Habits. In the previous chapters, I have told how to employ autosuggestion to overcome undesirable mental and physical troubles. But I will now attempt to show how to use autosuggestion to build up desirable and useful physical habits. All habits of mind and body are formed by repetition of a thought or action, and the majority of our habits have been formed involuntarily. But it is surprising how many useful habits can be formed if one will only study his requirements and proceed voluntarily to develop these desired habits. One man I know found it impossible to keep a pocket knife in his possession, for although he bought several knives every year, he either lost them or left them lying around. I asked him why he did not form a habit of putting his knife in a certain place every time after using it. He said that he had decided to do this several times, but had invariably forgotten the resolution and lost his knife. I told him that if he would use voluntarily autosuggestion for a few days and obey the suggestions, he could form a habit of taking care of his knife, and that the habit once formed would become a lifelong habit and enable him to keep a knife in his possession till it was worn out. I explained the theory for the operation of the autosuggestion as given in Chapter 1, and together we devised the following plan. He was to purchase an ordinary leather cover for his cheap knife, and every time he used the knife or loaned it, he was to hold the cover in his hand till the knife was returned to it. Then the knife was to be dropped into the right hand upper vest pocket. After purchasing the cover, he was to practice putting the knife into the cover, dropping it into his pocket, taking it out again, taking off the cover, opening the knife, closing it again, returning cover, and then to his pocket. He was to purchase the cover with the thought in mind that it was to help him to keep the knife in his right hand upper vest pocket. When taking the knife from the pocket, he was to say to himself, I'll put this knife in its case and return it to this pocket the moment I have finished using it, and I'll hold the cover in my left hand until I place the knife in it again. This man determined to try the experiment, and a few days later I asked him for his knife. Promptly, he drew it from the upper vest pocket, took it out of the case, and handed it to me, retaining the case in his left hand. I was pleased with the result of the experiment, and asked him if he had to think of putting it in that pocket every time. He replied that for the first few days he had voluntarily practiced taking out the knife and putting it back half a dozen times whenever he required the knife, until the act had become automatic. This incident occurred several years ago, but I met the man again a few days ago, and in the spirit of fun asked him for his knife. Again, his hand went to the upper right hand vest pocket, the knife was withdrawn, the cover taken off and held in the left hand, and the knife offered to me. It was one of the most beautiful pocket knives I have ever seen, and I commented on it. Imagine my surprise and gratification when my friend told me that it was only the second knife he had purchased since I told him how to form the habit, and that the first knife he bought to take the place of his old cheap knife was still in his possession, but completely worn out. One morning, some time ago, a patient from a distant city came to my office to consult me about her health. She was in a highly nervous condition from an experience she had passed through early in the morning before the train reached Chicago. She had washed her hands in the lavatory in the Pullman car and gone back to her seat. About 20 minutes later, she discovered that 2 very valuable diamond rings were missing and remembered that she had taken them off and laid them beside the basin in the lavatory. She hurried to the lavatory only to find the rings had disappeared. The porter denied having seen or taken them, although another passenger had seen him enter the lavatory as soon as my patient left it. Her husband spoke aggressively to the porter, with the result that he searched the bedding which had been taken from their berth and found the rings. My patient's husband told me that this was only one of many frights his wife had suffered through carelessness in leaving her jewelry lying around or hiding it, where she herself could not find it. In fact, the constant losing or hiding of the rings was considered a family joke. How to form a habit. While treating this patient for other troubles, I suggested it would be a good plan to form a habit by autosuggestion of putting her rings in a certain place every time she took them off her fingers. I made the same explanation to her that I made to my friend with the knife, and she decided to put it into practice. She decided she would tie her rings into a handkerchief whenever she took them off to wash her hands and tuck the handkerchief inside her waist or corsage at once. For several days, she spent a few minutes 4 or 5 times a day practicing taking off her rings, tying them in a handkerchief, and tucking the handkerchief away, saying to herself as she went through the practices, "Now I'll remember to do this every time I take off my rings." Within a few days, she told me that if there was not a handkerchief about her clothing when she went to wash her hands, she felt obliged to go and get one before washing her hands. One day, toward the close of her treatment, she visited a friend's home and, on going to wash her hands, discovered she had forgotten to bring a handkerchief, but did the next best thing by tying the rings in a towel and tucking the towel away till the hands were washed. Recently, I had some correspondence with my patient's husband, and anticipating this article on autosuggestion, I asked him a postscript if his wife had gone through any more experiences in losing her rings. I quote a paragraph from his reply. "Mrs. Blank wants me to say to you that her rings have never given her a moment's uneasiness since she formed the habit, and that for years she has not been caught without a handkerchief about her clothing. The sight of her rings always reminds her to see that she is provided with a handkerchief. If she takes the rings off on going to bed away from home, she puts them in a handkerchief and places the handkerchief where she will be reminded of it the first thing in the morning, generally in the toe of her shoe or stocking, or tied into the sleeve of her undergarment. The little suggestion you have made has proven very efficacious in her case, and we have used the principle with gratifying results in many different ways in our home, especially in molding the habits of our children." These incidents may seem too trivial to have so much space devoted to them, but they are simple examples of the hundreds of useful habits, great and small, that can be voluntarily developed by studying our necessities and failings and faithfully employing autosuggestion until we have accomplished the desired result. Habits of childhood. Childhood is the most favorable time to develop the little habits we carry through life, and the importance of giving attention to these little habits cannot be too strongly impressed upon the minds of parents of young children. So many parents believe that if they teach their children what is right and wrong from a moral and ethical point of view, clothe them and send them to school, they have done all that is required of them, and that the children will do the rest themselves and make a success in life. I do not doubt that many children brought up in this way make a success in life, but their success is often made in spite of their early training rather than on account of it. And although here and there we have a shining example of what can be accomplished by a rough diamond, the great majority of rough diamonds fall by the wayside and are discarded. The preference, 90 times out of the 100, being given to the finished article, other things being equal. The average man in every station of life prefers, even at first glimpse, to get some idea of the brilliance of a gem. The average man is in too much of a hurry to spend time trying to find out the qualities lying beneath the surface of a rough diamond. Occasionally, an accident or a rub may reveal the true value of a rough diamond, but the man who wants a diamond does not go hunting for the rough house kind. Instead, he selects the most brilliant-looking jewel his money will buy. As a matter of fact, there is no reason why brilliance and quality should not be secured in the same stone. If the parents of a rough diamond could only realize the handicap they place on their child by starting him out into the world without polishing him as much as possible, I am sure every parent would do his utmost to add a touch here and a touch there to the personality of his offspring during childhood. For it is during childhood that the little habits are formed, which, taken as a whole, do so much to influence his future career and station in life. I refer to habits of tidiness, manner, deportment, carriage, table etiquette, care of the toilet, etc. There comes a time in the life of every child when habits of this class have to be formed, and there is no reason on earth why they should not be formed in such a way that in later years they will not be a source of embarrassment to him, if not an actual hindrance to his progress. Of course, many will say that the absence of these little signs of polish should not be allowed to interfere with the man's standing in a community, that we should look only to the soul behind them, etc. This may be good philosophy, but the fact remains that it is not put into practice. I do not mean by this that a man is judged by the clothes he wears, although, without doubt, good clothing gives a man an air of prosperity and frequently assists him on the road to success. A man may be too poor to buy expensive clothes, but there is no reason why he should not do his best to keep what clothing he has in as good a condition as possible. And, if this is done, a man's clothing will not interfere materially with his ultimate success in business or social life. But what does interfere with it are the little uncouth habits that cost nothing to form or to change, except a little knowledge, a little self-examination, and a little application until correct habits are formed. While children are forming their habits early in life, it costs no more to teach them habits that give them polish than habits, which, although very insignificant when considered by themselves, undoubtedly retard their progress not only in the social world, but frequently in business life. Untidy habits. The chief partner of a large, successful business firm with whom I had a discussion along these lines told me that at one time he required the services of a solicitor to call on the leading businessmen in the larger cities. There were several applicants for the position, and he invited the most promising applicant to take lunch with him at his club to talk over business. This applicant had excellent references and seemed capable in every way, but during the lunch, he ate with his knife, drank coffee from his saucer, lounged all over the table, and after he had finished eating, tilted back his chair on its hind legs, and after picking his teeth thoroughly, took out his penknife, and during the balance of the conversation, continued to cut, scrape, and clean his fingernails. Now, my business, said this businessman to me, required a solicitor who could approach men of every type, one who could be received into their clubs or homes to dine with them if necessary, and I do not run an infant class to teach men how to eat and sit at the table, to inform them that manicuring should never be done in public, and that the picking of their teeth, if necessary, should be done in privacy. This man might have passed with many of my customers who knew no better, but the man I finally selected could get along all right, not only with those who cared nothing about manners or etiquette, but was welcomed into the homes and clubs of men who believed in polish. The man I eventually selected is now the junior partner of our firm, making over $10,000 a year, while the solicitor I refused to employ, on account of his vulgar little habits, is still working on a salary of $100 per month. One reader of my magazine, Suggestion, an insurance agent, said to me, "I have lived a happy-go-lucky sort of life, taking everything as it came to me, and have been fairly successful in business, but after reading your mail course in suggestive therapeutics, I began to employ suggestion systematically with my clients, and my successes have increased. But I have derived the greatest personal benefit from the lessons on habits. I had scarcely given myself a thought. I question if I knew I had self, but since reading those lessons, I have been practicing autosuggestion on myself most successfully, and have formed habits and systemized my work until I believe I save 2 valuable hours' time every day. And I have been teaching my children to form habits of system and precision, which I know will prove invaluable to them in a few years." This man made a study of his daily requirements and began to systemize his actions and work, just as any successful employer will systemize the work of his employees in order to get the greatest amount of work done in the regular working hours. He formed the habits of going to bed, arising, and eating at regular hours. Before using autosuggestion, he frequently found himself without a business card to present to a client. His fountain pen was sometimes without ink for days at a time, frequently necessitating a loss of time while his client went in search of a pen or ink in order to sign application blanks or contracts connected with the insurance business. He used to make notes of addresses and dates on the backs of cards, or trusted to his memory, with the results that the names and addresses and memorandum of important engagements were frequently lost or mislaid or forgotten. He generally carried a number of important letters in his pockets that came in from clients, and in referring to these letters, he frequently lost several minutes at a time while searching through them for the particular one he required, and sometimes it was necessary to go through these letters many times a day. Method in daily routine. Today, this man has developed a dozen useful habits. He numbers the several things he desires to do every morning before leaving his office to visit clients. For instance, he says to himself, "I know there are 5 things to be attended to before I leave this office. What are they? 1. Fill my card case. 2. Fill my fountain pen with ink. 3. Put blank applications and literature in my pocket. 4. Take out of my pocket any letters that are not required there and file them, and put the names of the writers on the back of the envelope of every letter I put in my pocket today. 5. Look over my date book, make a list of the clients to be seen today, and number this list according to the location of their houses and offices so that they can all be seen in the shortest space of time with the minimum amount of traveling." This man now has a date book, and the habit of jotting down everything with his fountain pen has been formed. He devotes the compartments of his pocketbook to different things, but these things are always to be found in their places: stamps in one, his own cards in another, business cards of other men in another, bank bills in another, etc. His knife is in one pocket, his pipe and tobacco in another, matches in another, and when he has a banknote changed, the pennies go into one pocket, the nickels and dimes into another, and the quarters and half-dollars into another. He set about forming this last habit systematically, and now separates his change automatically and distributes it to his pockets as soon as he has counted it. The result is that he never has to hunt through several pockets for carefare. Would it not pay many of us to study our habits and see if we cannot systemize our day until we can save 2 hours time every day? And, if necessary, let us polish up our little habits of life by autosuggestion till they will be pleasing to everybody and give us the confidence that comes from knowing not only how things should be done, but that we have done them right so often that we do them right habitually. Chapter 6. Autosuggestion and Personal Magnetism. Recently, I received a long letter from a correspondent asking several pertinent questions, among others the following. Also, will you tell me something to do that will develop some personal magnetism in me? For a long time, I have been aware that I do not possess as much personal magnetism as I would like to have, and I feel that the lack of magnetism keeps me from making the business and social success enjoyed by others who seem to have more personal magnetism. Is this force born in people? If so, why do some get so much of it while others get none? I cannot believe that nature favors some in this respect and denies others. Then what is this force? Can it be developed artificially, as many claim? I have sent dollars upon dollars to people who advertise and profess to be able to teach how to develop personal magnetism, but all I have for my good money are some nonsensical courses in hypnotism or some absurd exercises in concentration of the will and the concentering of the mind on those we desire to impress, or some highfalutin language that sounds so much but means so little, but all of it impractical and useless. You generally attack your subject in language that everybody can understand, and your explanations are satisfactory and practical. Now, would you not favor me with your ideas on this important but mysterious subject? Signed, T.D. from Pennsylvania. This letter is only a sample of many I received touching on this important subject, and although many believe personal magnetism to be an actual, tangible force like electricity, I cannot agree with them. Several correspondents have written to say they could actually demonstrate that they possessed personal magnetism, and the way in which they attempted the demonstration was to rub a sheet of writing paper between their hands, after which it would stick, for several minutes, to the wall or piece of furniture or any other object against which it was placed. Of course, every student of physics knows the absurdity of supposing this phenomena is a demonstration of personal magnetism. If paper be rubbed with a silk handkerchief or rubbed on a cat's back, the same electrical phenomena will follow, but to a stronger degree than if rubbed between the hands. Furthermore, the season of the year influences this experiment, for although it is possible to get perfect results on a cold winter's day, it is almost impossible to get the slightest results in warm weather. Accordingly, if the magnetizing of the paper were due to personal magnetism, the failure of the experiment in summer would show that personal magnetism disappears in warm weather. It is possible for anyone to magnetize writing paper in cold weather. A person with the least personal magnetism will succeed just as well in affecting the paper as a person who is conceded to have personal magnetism of the highest type. No, personal magnetism and electricity are not identical, nor are they in any way related. Electricity can be gathered from inert substances and carried around in a jar or in a cell, whereas so-called personal magnetism depends entirely upon the impression one individual makes upon the senses and the soul of another. A man with a loathsome skin disease showing all over his face might appear powerfully magnetic to a blind man by exhibiting kindness and sympathy, whereas he would seem positively repulsive to a man in possession of his five senses. Other things being equal, the man whose face, form, and clothing make the best appearance seems the most magnetic. However, a man may have the face and form of an Adonis. He may be ever so well educated. He may be kind and sympathetic. But if his glance is shiftless, if he is unable to look us steadily in the eye while conversing with us, he loses his magnetism so far as we are concerned, for we feel instinctively he is not to be trusted. A man may be an Adonis, look us straight in the eyes, and be perfectly honest, yet his intellect may not satisfy everyone, and some, in consequence, may find him much less magnetic than men plainer in form and feature, but with a finer intellect. Although to others in his own intellectual plane he may appear the most magnetic man in the world. A man's general appearance may be excellent, he may be honest, and his intellect above the average, but if he be selfish or unsympathetic, his magnetism loses power for us. A person in one stratum of society may appear highly magnetic to people in the same stratum, but let him enter another stratum, and on account of his boorish manners or lack of knowledge of etiquette, he will probably be considered uncouth and entirely lacking in personal magnetism. What is personal magnetism? If I were asked to define personal magnetism briefly, I would say it is the art of pleasing. And in reply to the question, can personal magnetism be cultivated? I would say personal magnetism can be cultivated by studying and practicing the art of pleasing. It is surprising how few persons devote a few minutes occasionally to study ways and means by which they could make themselves more agreeable and more pleasing to their own fellow men, when a few minutes daily earnest thought devoted to this purpose will accomplish a great deal through self-study and the intelligent use of autosuggestion. I consider the following attributes essential to the highest development of personal magnetism: a cheerful face with a steady eye, personal neatness, including cleanliness, good health, strength, determination, gentleness, modesty, even temper, coolness, kindly aggressiveness, confidence, fearlessness, and thoughtfulness and consideration for others. A person can be highly pleasing, magnetic, without perfect health, but good health is an excellent basis for the development of personal magnetism. A healthy person is usually more attractive than a sickly person, and it should be remembered that in cultivating personal magnetism, it is the senses that have to be pleased first. Afterwards, the soul. The shake of a warm, healthy hand is more pleasing, more magnetic to the sense of touch than the shake of a cold, clammy hand. The sight of a clean, bright face with a clear skin and a healthy glow is more pleasing to the sense of sight than a pale, sour, blotched face. A body and clothes free from odors of any kind are more pleasing to the sense of smell than the odor which arises from an unclean body, a foul breath, or from clothes kept in a stuffy home or saturated with tobacco or perfume, no matter how choice the perfume may be. For although some persons are very fond of perfume, a great many positively loathe it. A soft, low-pitched, well-educated voice is infinitely more agreeable to the sense of hearing than a monotonous, high-pitched, rasping nasal twang. The pleasing of the senses, therefore, must be taken into consideration in developing personal magnetism, and a little honest self-examination along the line I have indicated will enable anyone to establish healthful conditions, even to improving the health and actually changing the pitch and modulation of the voice. A study of the highly magnetic man will show that he is slow to enter a heated argument, except in the interest of right principles. Some people have the habit of butting in whenever there is a chance for an argument, merely for the sake of arguing, but this the highly magnetic man avoids. The average man has pet hobbies, and if given the slightest opportunity, he likes to express his ideas and propound his theories like a sage. As a rule, he dislikes to be contradicted or interrupted or to have his theories questioned. The highly magnetic man recognizes this fact and plays the part of an interested listener. In fact, he even goes out of his way to help the other fellow along in his discourse. The magnetic man never boasts about himself or his accomplishments in public. He is modest, not shy, has an encouraging word for everyone, recognizes and shows his appreciation of any courtesies or favors shown to him, uses flattery judiciously, and when he does a favor for a friend or stranger, he has the knack of making the favored one feel that he is doing a favor in accepting the favor. The magnetic man is thoughtful, courteous, and kind at all times to friends or strangers, not from selfish motives, which are always apparent, but for the reason that he has made it a principle until it has become second nature with him. He has a bright smile, a pleasant word, and a glad hand for everyone. He is never indifferent to the trials and suffering of those around him, but on the contrary, invariably has an encouraging, sympathetic word for those in trouble, and possesses the happy knack of making the other fellow feel that they meet on a common footing, the question of superiority or inferiority playing no part in their relations. The apparent lack of magnetism in some people can be directly traced to their home environment. The children of parents who are not good mixers and have but few friends and acquaintances are apt to grow up selfish and to keep to themselves, shunning all but a few playmates who first have to pass the critical, selfish examination of the parental eye. A child brought up in this environment becomes too critical in later life to make many friends, and in consequence is said to lack personal magnetism. I have received many letters of inquiry from people of this class asking what they should do to become more magnetic, and my advice to them has been to drop their criticism and prejudice of their fellow men, to entertain a kindly feeling for all mankind, to mingle with people who have hosts of friends, to meet these friends, and endeavor to make a friend of every one of them. And after all is said and done regarding personal magnetism, it reduces itself, in the last analysis, to the ability to make and hold friendships. Self-examination, the determination to improve or change certain traits of character, and the persistent use of autosuggestion are all beneficial, but it is the practical work of making friends and being kind and thoughtful for others that develops personal magnetism most rapidly. Traits of character cannot be established nor eradicated in a single day, but persistent daily effort with a definite purpose in mind will accomplish almost anything. Consequently, a person who sets out deliberately to develop personal magnetism should not be discouraged if he does not accomplish all he desires in a few days. If he is making intelligent effort, the mere effort with a mixed purpose in mind is bringing about changes in himself that he cannot measure even if he be conscious of the changes. Following persistent effort, these changes go on unconsciously until the desired goal is reached. The simplest, most practical, and most effective rule to follow in developing personal magnetism is to meet as many people as possible and to have each one of them leave you feeling better for having met you and believing that you are his friend and will be glad to give him a friendly reception every time you meet thereafter. Sitting in one's room practicing concentration and using autosuggestions, while serviceable if done for a purpose, will never, in themselves, develop personal magnetism. It is the practical work in the field of humanity that counts. Look after your personal appearance, your personal habits, etc. Then mingle with people of all classes, study them individually, and learn by experience how to please different personalities. Practice makes perfect, and as you meet more and more people, it will become easier and easier to please, till eventually the habit of pleasing will be thoroughly established. It is this habit of pleasing that constitutes personal magnetism and creates the magnetic man. Once this habit is formed, the magnetism seems to increase rapidly. The autosuggestions to be employed will necessarily differ with different people, but a little self-examination will determine the deficiencies, and once these are determined, the autosuggestions that should be used will become self-evident. When a person anxious to develop personal magnetism recognizes his deficient points, he should go to his room or some place where he can be absolutely alone with his thoughts. Then he should endeavor to picture in his mind the best course to pursue to overcome the deficiencies, and how he will be acting when the deficiencies have disappeared. Thinking earnestly beforehand of what one should do or how one should act in a certain situations or under certain conditions paves the way for the action when the conditions or situations arise. Thought tends to take form in action, and if the thoughts are earnest and determined, the action is almost certain to follow. In fact, an action planned beforehand, the result of matter and deliberate thought, seems to follow almost automatically, certainly more easily and naturally than an action thought out on the spur of the moment. Deliberate planning of this nature is known as autosuggestion. Besides these mental pictures, autosuggestions in the form of words spoken to oneself are very efficacious. The words, however, should not be repeated automatically, but spoken deliberately, with the mind dwelling on the full meaning of the words. To illustrate, I will give you a few autosuggestions which will prove helpful, and from these one should have no difficulty in originating many other autosuggestions to fit his own peculiar requirements. Autosuggestion. I am determined to become a strong, kind, magnetic man. I have kindly, generous feelings toward all mankind, and I shall draw the friendship of mankind toward me. I am careful about my personal appearance. I dress modestly, but neatly. On first appearance, this places me on an equal footing with the average man, but my kindness, my thoughtfulness, and my desire to be friendly with everyone lift me above my clothes, as it were, and draw my friends and the goodwill of all to me, myself, on account of myself. I am bright, happy, cheerful, and sympathetic at all times. I have an encouraging word for everyone, and everyone feels better for having met me. I am most honest and truthful, and can look every man squarely in the eyes. I am anxious to do what is right by everyone at all times. I do my best every day, and the knowledge of this fact gives me confidence in myself. People know that I will do only what is right. They trust me and feel that they can depend on me. For these reasons, among others, they are attracted to me. I am a strong, healthy, determined, kind, aggressive, confident, fearless man. I take things calmly, avoiding unnecessary excitement and argument. I am the friend of those in trouble, and no reasonable effort is too great for me, provided it will add a little happiness to the lives of deserving people. I will be kind to the old and young folks. I will be kind to every living thing. I will put myself in the other fellow's place, and will endeavor, whenever possible or reasonable, to do for him what I should like him to do for me if our positions or conditions were reversed. These kind, healthy, hopeful, helpful thoughts are influencing me in my life and actions, and I know they are drawing many kind, helpful friends to me. These thoughts and actions are magnetic. They are my thoughts. I, myself, am magnetic. Autosuggestions like these and others of similar tenor, if repeated frequently and earnestly, become fixed thoughts and principles provided an honest, unselfish effort is made to put them into practice. They unconsciously influence a man's whole nature and his actions for the better, and thereafter the people he meets are unconsciously influenced by his kind actions and noble nature and are attracted to him. Ask one of his friends what he finds in him that is particularly attractive, and he probably will answer, "Oh, I cannot tell exactly. I merely know that I like him. He has great personal magnetism." It is the ability to please by acts of kindness, sympathy, honesty, and strength of character on the part of the party of the first part, and the unconscious interpretation of these acts by the party of the second part, that constitute a personal magnetism, and lead many to believe that personal magnetism is per se an agent not unlike electricity or polar magnetism. End of chapter 6. Chapter 7. The cultivation of optimism through autosuggestion. Definition of words. Pessimism. The tendency to exaggerate in thought the evils of life or to look only upon its dark side, a melancholy or depressing spirit or view of life. Pessimist. One who exaggerates the evils of life or is disposed to see only its dark side. One who is given to melancholy or depressing views of life. Optimism. The belief or disposition to believe that whatever exists is right and good in some inscrutable way, in spite of all observations to the contrary. Optimist. One who believes in the present or ultimate supremacy of good over evil, one who always hopes for and expects the best, a person of hopeful disposition. Optimize. To take the most hopeful view of a matter, to hold or maintain hopeful views habitually. A typical case of pessimism. I am in receipt of a letter from a man complaining that the reading and study of New Thought and the New Psychology have not helped him in the least, although for several years past he has read all the New Thought literature he could purchase. He finds fault with his business, his family, his competitors, and his customers. He says that for the last few years, everything and everyone seemed to have conspired to make him miserable and fearful. That he would change his occupation if he knew what change to make, or would move to another town, only he is afraid the change might prove disastrous and his family would starve. He admits that he lacks confidence in himself, that he hates anyone who displays confidence, that he is a poor, sickly, miserable, sensitive wretch, etc. He ends by saying that his physical condition has been poor for years, but he would not care about this if anything could be done by suggestive treatment to relieve his mental troubles and make him more successful in business. My heart goes out to this man, for he is in the same condition as thousands of others who want to believe in the new thought and its principles, but cannot succeed in getting a demonstration of its power within themselves. Many new psychology enthusiasts in good health will say his failure to demonstrate is due to the lack of application, or lack of earnestness, or failure to grasp the spirit of the application of suggestion. However, I am not willing to admit this, for I have known people who believed thoroughly in suggestion and the new thought and understood the theories so perfectly that they could help others suffering from pure mental troubles, but seemed powerless to help themselves. The reason for these failures lies here. The average man who reads the New Thought magazines and New Thought literature is led to believe that mind is the only thing necessary to take into consideration. He reads the experience of others who have been assisted and the plausible theories of those who teach that mind is all and in all, that to think success, health, and happiness is to have them. There's too much of this nonsense published in connection with suggestion and New Thought. The New Thought theories are all right for people in good health with rich, red, normal blood nourishing the brain, the organ through which the mind operates. For under these conditions, it is comparatively easy to change a habit of thought, to make an optimist out of a pessimist, or to make a success out of a failure. But the New Thought becomes a positive failure in the majority of cases where there is poor health, unless the physical body and its requirements are given proper attention. The body requires the life essentials, air, water, and food, in certain proportions. And all the affirmations or autosuggestions offered by New Thought will not take the place of one glass of water or a few cubic feet of air if the physical troubles are due to the lack of the essentials. But autosuggestion can be used to create a desire, to take the life essentials, and to stimulate the organs of nutrition so that a good quality of blood can be supplied to the tissues of the body and the brain. Then, with the brain well nourished, the changing of habits of thought becomes much easier, and the New Thought principles work like a charm, if they are understood and persistently and intelligently employed. In my practice of suggestive therapeutics, I have found two classes of pessimists, the acute and the chronic. Acute pessimism. The acute pessimists are those who are naturally optimistic in their thoughts, but suffer from occasional attacks of the blues, due generally to imperfect elimination caused by overeating or underdrinking, or by both. These spells may last from a day or two to a week or 10 days, after which the mental depression disappears as quickly as it comes, and the individual again becomes as jolly and optimistic as ever, although when the attack is on, he cannot see good in anything, but on the contrary sees the worst side of everything. Careful attention to eating, breathing, and particularly drinking will relieve this temporary melancholia, and it is not likely to return if the life essentials are looked after daily. Chronic pessimism. The chronic pessimists I have again divided into two classes, those in whom pessimism has developed only after a long spell of poor health, and those that always enjoy good health but have been pessimists all their lives. Pessimism that has developed after a long spell of ill health can usually be overcome by building up the health and employing optimistic suggestions or autosuggestions, for a pessimist of this class realizes that his mental attitude is abnormal. He constantly seeks relief from it and is willing to do everything in his power to develop optimism. It is to this class that my correspondent belongs. And a recent letter from him in reply to an inquiry he received from me says that in all his new thought practices, instructions, and absent treatments, no advice had been given to him concerning the proper use of life essentials, and he had not given them a moment's consideration, believing the mind alone was sufficient to overcome all mental and physical troubles. He was drinking less than a quart of liquids per day, when he should have been drinking fully 2 quarts. Now that he is looking after the life essentials, his health will improve, and I expect all his old optimism, aggressiveness, self-esteem, confidence, and ambition will return as he employs the autosuggestions his study of the new thought has taught him to use. Pessimism, due to a lifelong habit of thought, is difficult to overcome for 2 reasons. First, on account of the fact that the pessimist, never having experienced the delights of optimism, cannot realize that his thoughts differ from the thoughts of others more optimistic than himself, nor that his thoughts so influence his actions and his conversation that they not only drive his optimistic friends from him, but surround him with the very conditions of which he complains most. Second, for the reason that even the pessimist becomes conscious of the fact that there is a difference between pessimism and optimism, and that they play an important part in one's success in life, he finds it difficult at first to keep his mind in optimistic channels long enough at a time for noticeable improvement to follow, and the very nature of his trouble tends to discourage him from further persistent, conscientious effort. But these poor victims can be turned into very fair optimists, especially with suggestive treatment administered daily by a competent suggestionist, although I know several who worked out their own salvation by persistently using autosuggestion. The pessimistic man is generally the personification of selfishness. In fact, pessimism and selfishness might almost be used as synonyms, for I have never known a pessimist who was not selfish, nor a selfish person who would not at least exhibit pessimistic traits at times. Thought takes form in action. For a positive demonstration of the fact that thought takes form in action, one need only study the daily life of a confirmed pessimist. I know several persons who suffer from chronic pessimism of a virulent type, but one poor fellow in particular, with whom I have become acquainted in a business way, will serve as an illustration. He is the proprietor of a store in a neighboring city, but such a store, it almost gives me the blues to go into it. His windows are dressed year in and year out with the same old signs, and there is nothing to give the store the cheerful appearance so essential to an up-to-date business establishment. But the atmosphere of the place is only in keeping with the proprietor. When he started in business 30 years ago, he employed 8 clerks, but his business has fallen off till he does all the work himself, and he scarcely is able now to pay rent, although competitors around him are increasing their business steadily every year. In the course of a 15 minutes conversation, the first time I met him, he told me all his troubles, which were many. According to his story, everyone has been trying to get the better of him ever since he started in business. His competitors resorted to unfair business methods. His landlord was endeavoring to drive him out by raising his rent. He could not get an honest clerk in his store. An old man had not an equal chance with a young man. He could not understand why people he had catered to so faithfully should be so ungrateful or so fickle as to give their patronage to every upstart who went into business in the same line as his. He supposed he could work along, as he was doing, from morning till night without a holiday till he was driven to the poorhouse or died. And although he had been in the same stand for 15 years, there was not a single person he could call on if in need of a friend, etc. Although I have had occasion to visit him many times during business hours, I have never heard him address a cheerful or encouraging remark to a customer. On the other hand, he waited on them, not only with an air of indifference, but apparently as if he were doing them a favor by allowing them to trade at his store, while others who dropped in to ask permission to use his telephone or to inquire about residents in the neighborhood were soon given to understand by his manner and his answers that he considered them a nuisance and hoped they had not mistaken his store for an information bureau. I have purposely led him into other channels of conversation with the same result. Everything was going to the dogs, the city, the country, etc. No matter what we talked about, his remarks were saturated with pessimism. He was ready to blame everything and everyone for his condition, and when I ventured to suggest that much of his trouble was due to his mental attitude, he was ready to show me the door. However, I am keeping him supplied with new thought literature and mottos and sincerely trust that they may eventually prove of assistance to him. He does not realize that his whole environment, including his store and stock, is a mirror-like reflection of his own thoughts. He has lost confidence in humanity, and humanity has lost confidence in him, with the result that his customers are few and far between. He feels that the world owes him at least a living, and that he must do his best to make it out of the customers that come into his net. The result is, they do not get as much for their money as elsewhere, and in consequence, they go elsewhere to deal. He is too selfish to give away a pleasant or encouraging word or even a smile, and in consequence receives neither. What a difference the injection of a few new thought principles would make in this man's business and in his private life. If he would but cast his bread upon the waters for a few weeks, by bestowing a smile here and a smile there, or a cheerful encouraging word to this customer and that customer, he would certainly feel better for the giving, and they would return to him 1,000-fold. If he would only assume that he is prosperous and proceed to give his store and his stock an air of prosperity, how much more attractive he could make his place look, and how much more inviting it would be for customers. If he would assume that every person that entered his store was his guest, whether he made a purchase or not, people would feel like returning to his store when they wanted anything in his line. I could suggest 100 ways in which this man could employ suggestion and auto-suggestion to increase his business, to draw friends to him, instead of driving them away, and to make the world and himself better and happier while he lives in it. Now, although the case I have cited is an extreme one, still it serves to show the positive effect that our mental attitude has upon our environment, our friends, and our success. Optimism is just as cheap as pessimism, but optimism assists materially in drawing to us all that is good and worthwhile having in this life. Then why not let it enter into everything we do? If we meet obstacles in our pathway of life, let us take hold of them with courage, backed by optimism, until we have removed them. And if we come to a seemingly impassable barrier, let us attack it cheerfully, believing that in time, ways, and means will be found to enable us to scale it. Our optimism may be the very means that will draw to us the friends who can give us the assistance required. Furthermore, by being on the alert, we are in position to accept the proffered assistance when it comes, instead of allowing it to pass, owing to our mental supineness. To those, then, who desire to develop an optimistic habit of thought, I would say first, remember this axiom: thought takes form in action. Study the axiom over and endeavor to grasp its full significance. Next, endeavor to develop generosity and be generous not only in the little things in life, but be generous in your thoughts. Endeavor to think well of everybody. Always be willing to overlook an apparent fault in another, believing that there are other qualities in the individual that overwhelm the deficiency. Take a broad, generous view of life and humanity in general, and you will find your old petty jealousies, absurd fancies, and trivial personalities that enter so much into your daily life completely drowned out by a flood of broad, generous, optimistic thoughts that will apparently bring the world to your feet. Optimistic autosuggestions. I recommend also the constant use of autosuggestions similar in character to those given below. These suggestions should be repeated many times every day, not automatically, but with a full conscience of their broadest meaning. The regular thinking of these suggestions will soon develop an optimistic habit of thought, provided, of course, the life essentials are also being properly supplied. I am partaking properly of the life essentials. This means that my body and brains are well nourished, and my mind, in consequence, can operate as clearly as the mind of the greatest optimist. I desire to change my whole habit of thought and my mental attitude toward everyone and everything. From today, I shall be generous in everything I do and in my thoughts. I shall see the bright side of everything and shall look only for the good in everyone and everything. I feel better already for having made up my mind to optimize. I shall talk and act like an optimist, knowing that I shall make everyone around me happier by being cheerful and saying cheerful things. My optimism will draw people to me. My cheerfulness will bring me staunch friends. Already I feel more ambitious. I am conquering myself. I am daily entering upon a new life, a life of cheerfulness and success. The world and everything in it is brighter already. Oh, I'm so happy and cheerful. I shall have a cheerful word and a cheerful look for everyone today. I will endeavor to make at least one person feel better for meeting me today. I realize that thought takes form in action, and these happy, optimistic thoughts will bring me the things I have desired most: friends, success, and happiness. I shall take a broad view of everything, for I believe the world is good, that everything works together for good, that humanity at heart is good, and that I have the best wishes of humanity on my road to happiness and success, and I am bound to succeed, for I believe in success. Hooray! I am free. I am happy and cheerful. I am an optimistic optimist optimizing to develop optimism. Note, as a preface to this chapter, I have introduced some definitions taken from the Century Dictionary. They are a new psychology sermon in themselves from the author. End note, and also end of chapter. Chapter 8. Autosuggestion for Developing Concentration. I am in receipt of a letter from a correspondent in which he says, "There's one thing I desire: concentration of mind. Persistence in following instructions given in books and courses that claim to teach concentration has failed to bring me results. I simply cannot think of anything so intently as to forget myself. I believe personal treatment or some help from outside would get me started right. But alas, there's no such help within 1,000 miles. I lack positiveness and the ability to focus my thoughts. Have you any help for me?" It is possible for a person to develop a muscle or a group of muscles in his body, provided those muscles are supplied with proper nutrition and receive judicious, regular exercise. But it is not reasonable to suppose that a man in the last stages of consumption could increase the strength and size of his biceps muscle noticeably. He might attempt the experiment of exercising the muscles for a few days, but each day would find his exercises becoming more burdensome. In fact, it is a question if he would ever be able to muster sufficient strength at any single time to exercise the muscles sufficiently to bring about any perceptible change, even if he had sufficient willpower to continue exercising faithfully. But it is probable he would quickly discard the exercise. Let a well-nourished, healthy man start to increase the development of his biceps, and if he put too great effort into his first exercises without producing any noticeable result, he is likely to become discouraged And unless his determination and willpower are strong, his exercises are likely to be abandoned before he has accomplished what he set out to do. Voluntary concentration of the attention is really a mental muscle, and its development depends on two things. First, the nutrition to the brain. Second, the extent to which the mental muscle is exercised. It is possible my correspondent is in poor health and his brain, in consequence, poorly nourished, in which case his exercises in concentration, no matter how faithfully practiced, will avail but little. Or he may have attempted too much to begin with and become discouraged, like the healthy man over-exercising his biceps at the start. Or perhaps he has led a sedentary mental life heretofore and expects to develop excellent powers of concentration in a few weeks, in which event he is like a man who expects to develop muscles rapidly in spite of having led a sedentary physical life, with his muscular development far below par to start with. Passive concentration. Perhaps my correspondent's concentration is even better than that of the average man, and he's merely undervaluing his powers. There's a great difference between passive concentration and active or voluntary concentration. The former requires no effort of the will, while the latter depends entirely upon the will. While we watch a good game of baseball or attend an interesting play at the theater, we lose ourselves, so to speak, in the game or in the play, and it does not require an effort of the will to keep the mind concentrated on these amusements, for passive concentration only is required. We lose ourselves in things that interest or amuse us. But let us endeavor to lose ourselves in the same way while studying Greek or Latin verbs, for instance, and we find we have a difficult task to perform. In fact, it requires an effort of the will to keep the mind concentrated on the verbs, to say nothing of being able to lose ourselves. Consequently, if my correspondent believes he should be able to concentrate his mind as easily on a difficult study as he does on a play at the theater, he is looking for a state of concentration which I have never observed in anyone. I have been consulted by brilliant students in perfect health who stood at the head of their classes in the hope that I could improve their memory and concentration. They have complained that they found it necessary to make great efforts to keep up their work, while fellow students seem to remember easily. Inquiry has brought forth the fact that my consultant's fellow students were just as jealous as his ability to memorize and concentrate, and had to work equally hard for every advance they made in their classes. There is always a tendency to believe that other people do things and learn things with less effort than ourselves, and we are inclined to find fault and blame ourselves when an exceptionally hard task is set before us. However, with good health to back us, no mental or physical task is too great to be overcome if we attack it judiciously and courageously, with pride in our own powers and determination in our heart. If a muscle of the body is to be developed, it must be exercised lightly at first, and the exercises must be taken faithfully every day, or possibly several times every day. As the development of the muscle increases, the length and vigor of the exercise can be correspondingly increased until the desired goal has been reached. But a highly developed muscle will soon retrograde unless constantly exercised and properly nourished, and sickness also soon works havoc with most highly developed muscular systems. Voluntary concentration. Similarly, in developing voluntary concentration, light exercises in concentrating should be used at first, and if the practices be kept up regularly, it will become possible to impose greater and still greater tasks upon the mind. But, like the physical muscle, the mental muscles will deteriorate during sickness, and they will also deteriorate when the individual is in health, unless they are regularly exercised and as regularly rested. It is, first, in keeping up the general health, and second, in the wise alternation of exercises and rest that success in concentration lies. There is no wisdom in overwork, especially while in ill health. The many sad disasters and absolute failures that have followed the unwisely persistent use of the mental muscles by students are to be met with every day, both outside and inside our insane asylums. The college man that has applied himself closely all the sensation should make the most of his vacation. On going back to his work, he will doubtless find that at first he does not concentrate so readily as he did before the vacation. But reinforced by the new store of energy, his former habits of concentration will speedily assert themselves, and he will soon be outdoing his former achievements. An overamount of rest for mental as well as physical muscles means deterioration. An overamount of exercise means collapse, and neither extreme is desirable. It is not my intention to give difficult exercises for developing voluntary concentration. There are many courses and books which give these exercises more fully than I can at this time, but intricate exercises are not necessary. Some instructors will tell you to gaze at the tip of your finger and practice thinking only of your fingertip. You are asked to practice this and other similar exercises several times a day until you can exclude everything else from your mind but the tip of your finger, or whatever other object you may be looking at. Now, although practices like this may assist, still there are more useful and better exercises, and the person practicing such an exercise as gazing at the fingertip is apt to be misled and discouraged if, after practicing for several weeks, he is still unable to exclude everything but his fingertip from his mind during this practice. As a matter of fact, it is impossible to concentrate the mind upon a single object or a single thought for more than a few moments at a time. Voluntary concentration really consists in a repetition of successive efforts to bring back a subject to the mind. No one can possibly concentrate his mind continuously upon an object or subject that does not change. One of the simplest and best practices for developing concentration is to read a sentence in a valuable scientific work, the subject matter of which in itself is absolutely unattractive, and then endeavor to reproduce the idea expressed in the sentence either verbally or in writing or both. Having succeeded in obtaining, memorizing, and reproducing the ideas contained in a single sentence, try several sentences at a time. Next, take whole paragraphs, then pages, then chapters, and finally a whole book. There is no better exercise in memorizing and concentrating than this. I would say, therefore, to any reader who desires to cultivate voluntary concentration, first, look to your general health. See if your stomach and bowels are performing their functions properly, and if their work is not up to standard and your circulation is below par, build up your health by employing autosuggestion and the life essentials as directed in the chapter devoted to autosuggestion and physical troubles. And if your concentration has formerly been good, and you are in poor health now, it is likely your old powers of concentration will return as soon as your health has improved. Having built up your general health, begin to take a few minutes practice in concentrating the attention several times a day, and steadily increase the length of time devoted to the exercises as you find you're improving. Autosuggestion for concentration. The systematic use of autosuggestion also from the first will prove of the greatest assistance to you. The involuntary mind should be impressed with what is expected to do and what it should expect you to do. To this end, such autosuggestions as the following will prove of service. My brain is now thoroughly nourished with good, pure blood, and is capable of doing as good work as any other brain in existence. I have mental muscles, and by exercising these muscles faithfully day in and day out, I know they will develop. They are developing now. I have willpower and determination, and when I command my mental muscles to concentrate on something I desire to study or on something I desire to accomplish, they obey my will. I realize that my voluntary concentration is developing now. I can apply myself to any work or any study, and I enjoy concentrating my attention. I look forward with pleasure to my next exercise in concentration. My mind is clear and active, and I can read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest anything I read or study just as well as anyone else. I have taken my exercises in concentration faithfully today, and I shall increase the length of the exercises a little tomorrow, a little more the following day, and so on, day by day, until I can concentrate for hours when necessary. I am a strong, determined, aggressive man. I have willpower, and I am succeeding in developing concentration because I always succeed in what I undertake. I find it very easy now to concentrate my attention, and I make it a point to concentrate my whole attention on anything I find to do until I have accomplished my task. Autosuggestions in this strain should be repeated as often as possible every day, say 50 to 100 times each day, and the mind should be allowed to dwell on the meaning of the self-assertions. There are 2 axioms every reader who would practice the autosuggestion should remember. Thought takes form in action, and a man can tell a story so often that eventually he will believe it himself. Consequently, if an autosuggestion be repeated faithfully and the mind be allowed to dwell on the full meaning of the suggestion, the involuntary mind accepts it as a fact and is influenced accordingly. The involuntary mind is very sensitive. Find fault with yourself and it believes you and influences you accordingly. Praise yourself and it becomes filled with pride, and in return gives you confidence and courage that will take you safely over the roughest roads. We are all endowed at birth with mental muscles, but in order to develop them, we must give them proper nourishment and sufficient exercise. There's no shortcut, nor any other road to the development of voluntary concentration. End of chapter. The achievement of success through autosuggestion. Not long ago, I received a call from a reader of suggestion who came to thank me for the benefit he had received from reading the magazine. He is the father of a large family, and up to 3 years before he called on me, was in very straitened circumstances. He had married while drawing a meager salary, which soon became inadequate to maintain his family's circle, which had increased with appalling regularity. The result was that after 10 years of married life, his health began to fail through overwork and incessant worry, for he had contracted a burden of debts from which nothing but death seemed to give him promise of relief. There was no chance of his receiving an increase in salary where he worked, and with so many mouths to feed, he was afraid to make an effort to secure a better position, lest he might be thrown out of employment entirely. Besides, he had lost ambition through sickness and worry, and his mind was filled with dread and fear for the future. As if this state of affairs was not bad enough in itself, the firm for which he had worked for years met with financial reverses, soon followed by bankruptcy, and he was left without employment. For 1 month, he sought a new position in vain. He answered advertisement after advertisement and called at one business house after another without success. Meanwhile, his mental condition grew more deplorable. At this juncture, he met a friend who was a New Thought enthusiast, and this friend, after explaining to him his ideas of the New Thought, persuaded him to send $10 to a well-known mental healer for a month's absent treatment for success. At this time, a $10 bill seemed to him a large amount to waste on an experiment, but by hard work he managed to raise the money in a few days and sent it off post-haste to the healer for his best success thought vibrations for 1 month. Meanwhile, he read a great deal of New Thought literature loaned to him by his friend and became imbued with its principles. In a few days, word came to him from the healer that the treatment had commenced and would be given at a certain hour each day, that he would henceforth be fired with new ambition, courage, hope, fearlessness, etc., and that success would be bound to follow. Within a week after beginning treatment, he felt better mentally and physically. Some of his old courage had returned to him, and he started out again in search of employment, thoroughly believing that the success thoughts being sent to him by the healer would turn his efforts into success. The turning of the tide. As if a magical wand had been waved over him, he was offered 2 situations the first day he began his search under the new conditions. Neither situation promised him sufficient salary to support his family, but this measure of success gave him greater faith in the powers of his absent healer and increased his confidence in his ability to secure a good position eventually. Another position was offered him the next day, and the day following still another, which he accepted at his old salary. But the spirit of the new thought was in him. He was enthusiastic over it and had become confident of success, feeling that the same power that had helped him to put on his feet again could be used to advance him still farther up the hill of success. In consequence, he kept his eyes and ears open to the opportunity and sought to make opportunities, with the result that about the middle of the second month's absent treatment, for which he had remitted another $10, he was offered and accepted a position which paid him not only half as much again as his old salary, but a good commission besides. The amount of the commissions depending on his own ability and energy. With success as his motto, and confidence born of his recent successes to back his motto, he started to work in his new position, believing that if commissions were obtainable, he would certainly have his share. At the end of the first month, he had doubled his old salary, and at the end of the third month, he had trebled it. But regularly, every month, he sent $10 for his absent treatment for success, dreading to stop the treatment lest the healer's power be withdrawn from him and he be thrown upon his own resources again. 6 months had lapsed since the beginning of the treatments, and 6 times had $10 been sent to the healer, when by accident a copy of Suggestion, the new psychology magazine, came into his possession along with some additional new psychology literature. It so happened that the copy of Suggestion he received contained an editorial which showed clearly and conclusively that the success of absent depends entirely on the autosuggestions of the person receiving treatment, not on the thoughts or vibrations of the so-called absent healer. In other words, he realized for the first time that the results that had followed the mailing of the first $10 to the healer had been brought about by the change of thought he had experienced. That by his own thinking alone he had aroused some power within himself which had changed his whole attitude toward the world at large and enabled him to turn failure into success. Having read the magazine through several times, he sent in his subscription for a year in advance and bought all the back numbers with which he could be supplied. These gave him new food for thought, and instead of sending $10 to his healer when his 7th month's treatment had expired, he sent $5 for a work I have published on suggestive therapeutics, in which the operations of the law of suggestion are clearly explained. A new day dawns. The reading of this work marked a new epoch in his march along the road of success, for thereafter, instead of feeling that his success depended on a second person, he knew that the success he had met with had depended on a change made within himself, unconsciously through autosuggestion, and realized that it was within his own power to make still greater changes and make his success still more marked through the intelligent and conscious use of autosuggestion. From the moment he came to this conclusion, he felt that he was a free man, and the practice of autosuggestion became as important a part of his daily life as eating or drinking, with the result that his confidence in himself, his determination to succeed, his aggressiveness, and his fearlessness developed rapidly. Before he had been 1 year in his new position, he was earning as much in 1 month as he had previously earned in 6 months. He had outstripped not only all the other employees of his own firm, but excelled those of other firms engaged in similar business. Flattering offers came to him from other firms, but his employers, rather than lose his services, gave him an interest in their firm at a lucrative salary and placed him at the head of one of the most important departments of their business. It was 2 years after receiving this promotion that he called on me, and the 2 years had been years of prosperity and success. Although he was about to take a 2 month vacation with his family, he looked as if he had always enjoyed perfect health, and he informed me that since studying suggestive therapeutics, he had been able to keep himself and his family in excellent health. Now, I do not claim that everyone who will employ autosuggestion faithfully will achieve success as quickly and as markedly as the man whose case I have cited, but by learning how to employ autosuggestion and by using it faithfully, he can keep himself in such a mental attitude that he is prepared to grasp an opportunity when it presents itself. But a man who has developed self-confidence, determination, aggressiveness, and fearlessness by using autosuggestion will not sit idle waiting for opportunities to come to him. Instead, he will go in search of them, and if none seem available, he will make them himself. Everyone should study the law of suggestion and learn how to employ autosuggestion. A person who does this will never enslave himself by feeling that his health and success depend on thought forces of some healer 1,000 miles away. Instead, he will become conscious of the marvelous powers of his own mind. He will be left independent in thought and action, and can assist very greatly in making his life and success conform to his ideals. For the benefit of any who may desire the use of autosuggestion for bringing about the mental attitude that encourages success, I will give an outline of autosuggestions I recommend. These should be repeated earnestly to oneself many times every day. The mind should be allowed to dwell for a moment on each autosuggestion till its full meaning is grasped. I have given only a few, but many more can be introduced to suit the individual requirements. All suggestions should be encouraging, optimistic, positive, and affirmative. Autosuggestions for success. I am gaining in health by thinking thoughts of health and partaking properly of the life essentials. I am becoming a strong man in every sense of the word. I am a strong man now. Since my strength has increased, I have more determination, more confidence in myself, and more aggressiveness. I am filled to overflowing with confidence and aggressiveness. I feel that I must go out amongst men and let them feel my confidence, my aggressiveness, and my strength. I am a strong man. I am a fearless man. I am an ambitious man. I have an object now in life. I desire to be a success. I can and I will be successful in everything I undertake. I have all the attributes essential to success. I am strong physically. I have determination, kindly aggressiveness, confidence, and fearlessness. With these attributes, I can succeed in anything honorable I undertake. First, I make sure I am right in my undertakings, and then my aggressiveness and fearlessness carry me through everything. I make friends wherever I go, everyone likes me, and when I approach a person on a business proposition, I succeed because I know I am right, and my strength, determination, aggressiveness, and earnestness win the day for me. I am a success. I work earnestly and faithfully every day to do my best during the day, and I am always on the alert to take advantage of every opportunity that presents itself. I succeed because I am a success. End of chapter. Meet me at the next video as we continue on with the reading of autosuggestion, what it is, and how to use it for health, happiness, and success. And that is where Herbert Parkyn is going to start giving us some ideas on how we can subliminally reprogram our mind to reprogram our minds to get rid of chronic health issues, and as well as how to work with visualization to create pictures and images that help in manifestation. On your way over, please do hit that like button, share, and subscribe.